Hi there, me again. Please excuse the hat. Please excuse the background. I was, kind of determining different things. I was messing around with like different backgrounds, and I was trying to mess around with different hairstyles, and I was spending so much time on it. I was just like, if I spend this much time on all this stuff, I am never going to film anything. So I put the camera there, I put the hat on here, and I'm just pressing record, and we're just going to shoot a video right now. And what are we talking about? Well, you saw the title of the video that I've not titled yet, but it's going to go along, something along the lines of wrestling terms. Now, why am I making a video about this? Okay, well, the other day I was hanging out with my girlfriend, which, by the way, I do actually have one. I can't believe it either. Anyways, we were hanging out, and she was asking me about wrestling, and she was kind of trying to ask me what the appeal of wrestling is. And, I was explaining it to her, and as I was explaining it to her, I realized there are so many wrestling terms and lingo that I had to explain to her, that I was like, there is a lot of wrestling specific terms that only wrestling fans would know. A lot of these terms I'm going to teach you today only really apply to wrestling. You wouldn't really use these terms in things like music or television or movies. So I basically kind of wanted to go and make this list of wrestling terms that you will hear a lot in the wrestling sphere. And if you're somebody who's just getting into wrestling, or maybe you're in a situation where your best friend or your boyfriend is a really massive fan of wrestling and you just want to know what the hell they're talking about, well, this video is right for you. So I'm going to give you 10-ish terms to kind of get started with your understanding of professional wrestling. The first term that I wrote down is babyface. Now, babyface, that sounds really weird, but babyface is a term that you use to describe a good guy, a character that you're supposed to cheer for in professional wrestling. Professional wrestling, it's not fake. It's scripted, it's predetermined, it's a written media form, and there are characters in it, and good characters are baby faces. They just have these faces, which you look at them and you just want them to succeed. I think of guys like Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes is a baby face. He just has that face where you're just like, you know what? Yeah, that's a guy that you can see kids looking up to. You can see adults wanting to see win. Other really known baby faces I am thinking of off the top of my head are guys like Rey Mysterio, Daniel Bryan, Sami Zayn, Bret Hart, and then Jeff Hardy as well. So, just wrestlers that are very, very popular with the crowd. They're very much meant to sell t-shirts, action figures. They're kind of face you want to see either holding a championship belt or on the side of a cereal box, but yeah, that's what babyface means. Okay, and the next term, we just talked about babyface. Well, we're going to talk about the opposite of a babyface. We call them heels in professional wrestling. The word heel is meant to apply to people who are just scum of the earth. You hate them, you want to punch them in the face, you want to see them lose. They're the bad guys of the stories. Notable heels I can think of off the top of my head are probably MJF in AEW. He's a very good heel. Seth Rollins has always been a really good heel. I've always loved Kurt Angle as a heel, even though he's bounced back and forth. I was gonna say Hulk Hogan, so I will. Randy Orton, my gosh. Okay, very quickly. Randy Orton, 2009, Randy Orton is easily one of the greatest heels, one of the greatest villains ever seen on this planet Earth. So, good news, you guys are actually getting extra on the video, because as I was talking about heels, I realized there was a word that I was missing from my original list, and that is called heat. Heat is basically like bad, angry energy that you get from the crowd. So, the purpose of the heel is to generate heat in the crowd, because the idea is that you're getting the crowd really hot, you're getting them angry, you're getting them very very boisterous, very I don't know, maybe violent, I don't know. If a heel is doing their job and they're generating heat, then there's a good chance that people in the audience are booing him, cursing him, calling him names, and then maybe throwing stuff at him. but that is what heat is. So you will hear a lot of times a heel is generating heat from the crowd. Another extra term that I'm going to throw in there is called a tweener. So that sounds really weird, but tweener is basically somebody who is kind of a babyface, kind of a heel. So kind of a good guy, kind of a bad guy. And the title of that is tweener because they're between. So like they're, between being a heel and being a babyface, they're a tweener. The idea of a tweener is basically maybe somebody who is a heel for a really, really long time and maybe has this kind of Darth Vader aura about him that you don't want to lose that aura or that attitude entirely, but you do want to encourage the crowd to start to cheer for him more often. So they'll have a bit more good guy tendencies. Maybe they won't cheat to win as much. Maybe they won't, badmouth the heels. Maybe they will, shake hands with other baby faces. Or maybe they will, maybe do some random act of good that would designate them as not being entirely heelish, but maybe they still aren't like a super duper, friendly person either. The next term that we have on our list is shoot. Shoot basically means something going off script. Sometimes wrestlers just kind of refuse to follow the script, or sometimes there are moments where, there is no script and the wrestlers just kind of have to do whatever they feel like it. Sometimes for, good purposes, sometimes for malicious purposes. So that's what a shoot is. A shoot is basically kind of when a wrestler takes creative liberties and improvises their own ideas. A shoot hit would be if a wrestler actually punched him, like his opponent, like with the intention to hurt them. Not the intention to make it look like a punch had gone through, but like if they actually punch them in the face. That would be a shoot. Wrestlers' reason for doing that, who knows? Obviously sometimes there's grudges, but that does happen sometimes. Another example in a verbal shoot is basically when somebody kind of peels back the curtain and really kind of talks about what they really mean and what's actually, going on. So a very, very good example of, a verbal shoot would be CM Punk's pipe bomb promo. We'll talk about it later, but basically CM Punk in 2011, he went out there and, according to interviews, he was told to just go out on stage and say whatever was on his mind. He wasn't given a script, he wasn't given bullet points. They said, you know what, just talk about whatever, and he did. He shot all over. That sounds terrible. He conducted a shoot in which he was calling out some backstage tendencies and people that he really didn't like, and he was basically peeling back the curtain to the audience and telling them things that we weren't really supposed to hear. I think that's a really good example of a shoot, and I think a shoot is basically anytime a wrestler shows the audience something that they aren't necessarily supposed to see. There is an excerpt from a documentary or from a book or from an interview from Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold Steve Austin is one of the most famous, if probably not the most famous wrestler ever. When he first got into the business of professional wrestling, he was not aware that it was scripted. So when he got into it, he thought it was real. And the way he tells the story, it's oh man, I was backstage and I thought this thing was a damn shoot. I thought I was gonna go out there and have to beat the piss out of him. Because he didn't know that it was choreographed, or that it was predetermined, or that it was supposed to look like a fight, not actually be a fight. But that's just one of my favorite stories of the word shoot being used. Okay, now, so we have shoot out of the way, we have the opposite of it now, we have work. And work is really easy. Work just means work of fiction, work of art. When you're looking at something in wrestling, it's all a work, if that's what it means. Anything that is scripted, or anything that is supposed to be fed to the audience, that is a work. Sometimes a work will be disguised as a shoot, but it's not. I know that makes no sense. Let me give you an example. Okay, so I think there was an instance in 2017, 2018, there were two commentators. There was Corey Graves and there was Booker T. Corey Graves was making comments about Booker T that on the surface seemed like actual beef, like actual animosity. A lot of people on the internet were like, oh, Corey Graves has a genuine problem with Booker T, and then Booker T went on his podcast saying about how he was gonna fight Corey Graves the moment he saw him again. Did that happen? No. They didn't actually fight. They revealed a couple months later, they said, no, it was all a work. We were working the audience. We were working the fan base. We were making them think one thing when in reality, it was just like we were working them into this fabricated story that is not real, but we made them think it was real. We worked them. So I think that's the best example I can take. I think working in professional wrestling terms definitely applies to those situations where you are supposed to, as an audience member, you are really supposed to question whether or not you're seeing is following the script, or if it's not following the script, or if it's scripted to look like it's not following the script. If that makes no sense, that's what I love wrestling for. It's just so many different parts. But yeah, that is what work means. I feel a little bit bad. I feel like I should have introduced this this next term earlier. Sorry about that. It's called promo. Promo is any verbal exchange, basically like any verbal portion of the wrestling show. So, believe it or not, in a WWE episode of Monday Night Raw on like the weekly television, it isn't just 3 hours of dudes fighting. No, there are a lot of portions where people literally just come out to the ring with a microphone and they talk to the crowd. That is called a promo. I think the reason why it's called a promo is because it's really a promotion. So sometimes a new wrestler will come and he'll have a microphone and it'll be an opportunity for him to promote himself to the crowd, to, give them some insights on who he is as a character, what his intentions are. It's basically like a self-conducted interview, I guess. It's like a declaration of their intention. That's basically what a promo is. Sometimes, if a wrestler is already in a rivalry with another wrestler, the purpose of the promo will be to talk about the other wrestler. And the promo is promoting the match that they're going to have later. So they go out and they say, yeah, I'm going to beat Gunther at the next Saturday night main event. That would be an example of a promo. Just anything that is, with the microphone. If you see a microphone and you see a guy walking to a ring, you say, promo. Basically it. Oh, and sorry, quickly what I was mentioning before. So what CM Punk was doing in 2011, that was an example of a shoot promo. It was a verbal presentation that was going off script. Yeah. This next term is called the spot. What does a spot mean? Okay, the spot is a section, a portion, a moment of the match in which something unbelievably crazy happens. So it's normally when either this crazy move happens or some sort of weapon is put in. So I think to make it really easy, the most common spots that you'll see in professional wrestling will be something like a chair spot, when a wrestler introduces a steel chair into the match and they hit him. They hit the other wrestler, and that's a spot. Another really common form of a spot is called a table spot. So that's when, wrestlers throw another wrestler through a table. It's called a table spot. A spot is any moment that is supposed to basically excite the crowd. Because a crowd, for as much as they love, seeing two guys just fight each other and throw each other around, what people really like to see is a crazy spot or a crazy moment where something really violent will happen. Whether it's a guy jumping off a ladder, or a guy jumping through a table, or a guy hitting somebody with a kendo stick or a baseball bat, those are all spots that are meant to really get the audience like really excited. So that's what spot means. So I think this is a really important one. It's called the bump. Bump is any high impact spot in which a wrestler just really just hits the ground really hard. I think a very common bump is probably like a suplex, or when basically a wrestler is hoisted in the air, thrown onto the ground. That's a good example of a bump. It's just any point of impact that the wrestler makes with either the ground or the barricade, but mostly the ground. Yeah. All right, going back to our discussion of heels and baby faces, we have what is called the turn. As you can guess, that's when a good guy turns bad or a bad guy turns good. So, this is used in conjunction with the face and heel turn. So when you say, oh, he's turning face, that would mean that, I don't know, Darth Vader has killed Emperor Palpatine and he saved his son Luke Skywalker. That's a face turn. A heel turn is, oh no, Anakin Skywalker has cut off Mace Windu's hand and Palpatine killed Mace Windu afterwards. Like those are those moments where good characters become bad, bad characters become good. It's pretty self-explanatory. So basically, anytime you see a wrestler out there, let's say, I think here's a really good example, a very recent one. So John Cena, for years, was a good guy. He was a baby face. He was the baby face. And this year, he had his retirement year, and he just got his qualification to face the main champion, Cody Rhodes, at WrestleMania. And the two baby faces, they embraced in a sign of good sportsmanship and, respect. Afterwards, John Cena attacks Cody Rhodes. He hits him with a low blow. He hits him with the championship belt, and he brutalizes him in a way that you would not see a superhero like a Captain America or a Superman brutalize somebody else. In that moment, John Cena turned heel, and it has not been good ever since. And I mean that in every way you could possibly imagine. Kayfabe. Kayfabe. That's a really weird word when you're talking about an exhibition of strength and power. Kayfabe seems like a weird term. Anyway, okay. Kayfabe, basically, the way I, phrase it is it's character fabrication. Kayfabe is basically this kind of reality that wrestling is trying to push on. And that's the reality that they want the people in the audience to believe. So kayfabe was a lot more of a common term, and it was a lot stronger back in something like the 80s and 90s, before social media, before you knew a lot about wrestlers. So when the term maintaining kayfabe was applied to like the 80s and 90s, that meant that a guy like The Undertaker, a guy who was like on TV, he was a zombie. That meant that when he was out in public, he wasn't dressed in like normal clothes. He would dress up in like sunglasses and in like long black leather jackets. He wasn't necessarily a zombie, but if people saw him on the street, they would think, oh yeah, that guy's like weird. That was his way of maintaining kayfabe. Another really, really common way of maintaining kayfabe is basically, this was really popular in like the 70s and the 80s, is basically baby faces, like guys who are baby faces on TV could only hang out with guys who are baby faces on TV. So, you wouldn't see in public Hulk Hogan hanging out with the Iron Sheik. That if they're enemies on screen, then, in order to maintain that image, that illusion, they will pretend to be enemies in real life. That was the most common thing in wrestling for a really, really long time. Now, as like social media has kind of broken the lines of kayfabe, of this fabricated reality that people are supposed to buy into, it's been very hard to maintain because you'll see wrestlers and you know, they're hanging out with each other, and you know, maybe it's not consistent with the storyline, because like it makes sense, because, you know, for example, like let's say two brothers are, you know, in a really intense rivalry. Well, you know, kayfabe would dictate that they don't hang out with each other. I think another really good example of kayfabe being kept alive nowadays is Dominic Mysterio right now tweeting about how much he hates his dad, Rey Mysterio. So it's just really funny. But now obviously it's probably not the case, but the fact that he's putting an effort to maintain this like fabricated character is really cool. So I hope I explained it. Very weird term, but yeah, kayfabe is basically this illusion that what you're seeing on TV is also happening outside of TV. Yeah. Okay, so the last term that we're going to be talking about is Booker. Now, unfortunately, I'm not talking about Booker T. Booker in the wrestling term basically means the author, or I think the best way to describe it is the director of the product. So, you know, when you think about the presentation of wrestling, you got to think about, you know, all these different things. Who is the leading creative vision of all of it? Well, that is the booker. So if you want to apply this to other forms of media, let's say George Lucas was the booker of the Star Wars original trilogy. He wasn't necessarily like directing all of them, but he was like the head creative director throughout the entire original trilogy. Another example would be Kevin Feige in Marvel Studios. Kevin Feige, in essence, is the booker of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. All of the creative ideas come from him, and he's the one responsible for telling this overarching story across all these products, despite the fact that these products will have their individual writers and directors and producers and whatnot. I think the best example of it right now actually is James Gunn in DC Comics right now. James Gunn, yes, he is directing the Superman movie, but he's also very, very heavily involved in creative of the greater universe. So let's apply that to WWE. Triple H is the head booker. He's the head of creative. He books everything. And when I say book basically means just write, or organizes, or dictates. So to book something basically means you're putting something into motion. Like, you know, like you're booking it. The way you would book a reservation, Triple H would book a certain match, or he would book a certain moment to happen. Now, wrestlers, or I should say, wrestling matches, sometimes have their own individual bookers, like for specific matches, but there tends to be just a head booker, which is what Triple H is. So I feel like I've over-explained it, but booker basically means the head creative vision behind the entire product. Okay, we made it to the end of the video. I want to say thank you so much for checking it out. If I have done a good job explaining these things, great. Tell me which one is your favorite term that just sounds really funny or is very interesting. If there's a specific term, because you know all these terms have a lot of examples connected to them, if there's a certain topic that you want me to kind of get into more and kind of do another rambly thing like this, please let me know, and please use these terms in front of your wrestling friends. I guarantee you they're going to be really impressed. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much. You have a great day.